Hi everyone, welcome to my channel International Storyteller. In this channel, you will find true horror stories worldwide. These stories are for entertainment purposes only. In this video, I will tell you the ghost story of the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall. The Brown Lady of Raynham Hall is a ghost lady that reportedly haunts the Raynham Hall building in Norfolk, England. Raynham Hall is a family house built in the early 17th century. The ghostly image of the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall is one of the most famous ghost photographs of all time. This ghostly image of the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall has become famous not only in England but all over the world. The ghostly image of the Brown Lady walking down the stairs of the Raynham Hall building has been widely circulated as undeniable proof of the existence of ghosts. But there are already reports of many people claiming to have seen the ghost of the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall since the year 1726. People called this ghost the Brown Lady because she wears a brown dress while wandering the halls and staircase of the Raynham Hall building. The ghostly figure of the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall was captured by two photographers, namely Captain Hubert Provand, who was a London-based photographer, and his assistant, Ender Shira. On September 19, 1936, Captain Hubert Provand and his assistant Indra Shira were taking photographs of Raynham Hall for their article called Country Life magazine. First, they took one photograph of the Raynham Hall building's main staircase. After that, they were setting up to take a second photograph. But, suddenly, Ender Shira saw a misty ghostly figure in brown dress approaching down the stairs towards them. In a moment, she urged Captain Hubert Provand to take a photograph of the ghostly figure walking down the stairs. Captain Hubert Provand quickly removed the lens cap on his camera, turned on the flashbulb, and captured the ghostly figure of the Brown Lady walking down the stairs on camera. The captured ghostly figure of the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall was published in Country Life magazine on December 26, 1936. This photograph allegedly shows the ghostly figure descending the Raynham Hall's grand staircase. Many experts examined the negative image of the ghost captured by the camera and declared that it was genuine. Since then, the ghostly image of the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall quickly became a sensation and became one of the most famous ghost photos of all time. Ever since publication, the image has been used as proof of ghost existence. Visitors and staff of the Raynham Hall building, as well as residents, have all reported that they have experienced scary phenomena such as unexplained footsteps, flickering lights, and the ghostly apparition of the Brown Lady walking through the corridors and in certain parts of the hall. Her restless spirit is eternally bound to the Raynham Hall building and is believed to be wandering the halls forever. Who is this ghost known as the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall, and why is she haunting the Raynham Hall building? In order to know this, let us hear the story. Many claim that the ghost of the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall is actually the spirit of a woman called Lady Dorothy Walpole who once lived at the Raynham Hall building. Lady Dorothy was born in September 1686 at the nearby building called Houghton Hall. She was the 13th child of Robert Horace Walpole and Mary Burwell. Her brother, Sir Robert Walpole, was considered to be the first Prime Minister of Great Britain, and her father, Robert Horace Walpole, was also a Member of Parliament. Thus, Lady Dorothy was raised in one of the most wealthy families in England. Her father, Robert Horace Walpole, acted as a guardian of a guy named Charles Townshend. Charles Townshend was born in 1674 at Raynham Hall in Norfolk, England. When he grew up, he served as the Secretary of State for a decade. When Lady Dorothy was 15 years old, she fell in love with Charles Townshend, who was 12 years older than her at that time. For many years, they fell in love and finally wanted to get married. So, Charles Townshend requests Lady Dorothy for a marriage proposal. But Lady Dorothy's father refused to allow it, as he thought he would be accused of having his eye on the fortunes and property of Charles Townshend. Upon the rejection of the marriage proposal, Charles Townshend married another lady named Elizabeth Pelham. After Charles Townshend got married, Lady Dorothy was heartbroken and devastated. So, she forced herself into a wasteful life by going to parties and making love with different men to heal her broken heart. At that time, Lady Dorothy secretly had an affair with a man named Lord Thomas Wharton. But Lord Thomas Wharton was a lazy and irresponsible person who soon left the country because of his debts. Then, in 1711, Charles Townshend's wife, Elizabeth Pelham, died. 2 years later, Charles Townshend and Lady Dorothy got married at Raynham Hall and reunited at last. Since then, they had been living together happily for 13 long years and had had 7 children. So, everything seemed like a wish coming true for Lady Dorothy and Charles Townshend. Then on March 29, 1726, Lady Dorothy passed away at the age of 40 after suffering from smallpox. But the real reasons for Lady Dorothy's death remain hidden and is still a mystery. A funeral for Lady Dorothy was held, and Lady Dorothy's dead body was buried in St. Mary's Churchyard at East Raynham. But many people believed that her funeral was fake and staged. They believed that she was alive and kept in a locked room somewhere in the Raynham Hall building for many years before she died violently. The story goes that, after Charles Townshend and Lady Dorothy had been living together happily for 13 long years, he discovered that his wife, Lady Dorothy, had a love affair with Lord Thomas Wharton before their marriage, which Lady Dorothy never told him. Upon discovering the love affair between Lady Dorothy and Lord Thomas Wharton, Charles Townshend felt anger and madness towards his second wife, Lady Dorothy. So he allegedly locked his wife, Lady Dorothy, in an upstairs room at the Raynham Hall building as a punishment for her disloyalty. She was refused to leave the Raynham Hall building forever and was living a lonely life inside the lock room. She was not allowed to see her own children, and her children too were not allowed to visit her until her death at the age of 40. Many also believe that Lady Dorothy was starved to death. This isolation and heartbreak that lead to the tragic end of Lady Dorothy is often considered as the reason for her spirits cannot find peace and remain forever at the Raynham Hall building. Since her death, she is said to roam the Raynham Hall building in a brown dress and carrying a lantern. In another story, Lady Dorothy was mentally ill after having a lonely life inside the locked room. So after 2 years of being kept locked up, she tried to escape from the Raynham Hall building, but her husband, Charles Townshend, found her. Then Charles Townshend pushed her down the grand staircase. She died of a broken neck after falling from the grand staircase. Ever since that incident, her ghost is believed to still walk the grand staircase of the Raynham Hall building. For centuries, there were numerous reports of the ghost of the Brown Lady wandering inside the Raynham Hall building. One of the first sightings of the Brown Lady walking along the stairs and corridors of the Raynham Hall building was by King George IV, who was a member of the royal family. During the 1800s, when King George IV was a young prince, he stayed a night at the Raynham Hall building. He was sleeping in the state bedroom. But when he woke up in the middle of the night, he found a strange lady all dressed in brown. The strange lady was standing near his bed for a moment, and then she walked away from the room. Immediately, King George IV roused the whole household and furiously told them that he had been disturbed by a lady who stood by his bedside. But all of the household members said that they have no idea who the lady was. After seeing the ghost of the Brown Lady, King George IV was frightened, and immediately he left the Raynham Hall building and promised that he would never come back again. But the first written recorded of the sighting of the ghost of the Brown Lady was in 1835. In December of 1835, a Christmas festival was organized by Charles Townshend in the Raynham Hall building. He invited many guests to attend the Christmas party. 2 guests, namely Colonel Loftus, who was a relative of Charles Townshend, and his friend Hawkins, were also attending the Christmas party at the Raynham Hall building. That night when Colonel Loftus and his friend Hawkins decided to go to their bedroom for sleep, they saw a lady in a brown dress standing at the top area of the staircase. Colonel Loftus and his friend Hawkins knew that the apparition of the lady was definitely not a human. Colonel Loftus called out to her, and a moment later she quickly disappeared. Colonel Loftus was a brave man, and he decided that he needed to solve the mystery of the ghostly apparition of the Brown Lady. So, the next day, at night, he cleverly stationed himself at a point in the corridor where the ghostly apparition of the Brown Lady would be able to be seen again. His plan worked, and this time the Brown Lady appeared a little bit closer to him. But to his horror, the place where her eyes should have been was represented by 2 empty eye sockets. Later, Colonel Loftus made a sketch of the Brown Lady. In the next morning at breakfast, he showed the scary sketch of the Brown Lady to Charles Townshend, his family members, and fellow guests who came for the Christmas party. After seeing the scary sketch of the Brown Lady, Charles Townshend admitted to his family members and guests that he had seen the Brown Lady several times in his bedroom. Upon hearing those incidents, several members of staff were very frightened, and they permanently left Raynham Hall. Then 1 year later, the next reported sighting of the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall was made by a Royal Navy captain named Frederick Marriott. Captain Frederick Marriott was a friend of the family of Raynham Hall. In 1836, he visited Raynham Hall on a hunting trip. During that time he heard the story of the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall. Captain Frederick Marriott believed that the ghost sightings at Raynham Hall were nothing but some smugglers who tried to keep people away from the area. He wanted to prove that the haunting at Raynham Hall was merely a group of local smugglers playing tricks on the Charles Townshend family. So he requested to spend some days in the most haunted room of the Raynham Hall building. After Captain Frederick Marriott came to Raynham Hall, he stayed in one of the most haunted rooms where Lady Dorothy's portrait was hanging. He slept each night in the room with a loaded revolver under his pillow. For 2 days, he saw nothing and slept soundly inside the room. However, on the third night, two young men who were his nephews knocked at his door. The two nephews told Captain Friedrich Marriott that they had brought some new model guns and wanted him to check it. So, the two nephews asked Captain Friedrich Marriott to come over to their room, which was at the other end of the corridor. After some time, Captain Friedrich Marriott left his room and was going to his nephew's room. He also brought his revolver with him. He was walking along the corridor, which was long and dark due to the lights being turned off at that time. As Captain Friedrich Marriott reached the middle of the corridor, he saw a woman with a lantern approaching towards him from the other end of the corridor. At first he could not see the woman's face properly and assumed that the woman was walking upstairs to take care of the children living in the Raynham Hall building. But when Captain Friedrich Marriott suddenly came face to face with a ghostly female figure, he recognized the woman because her features and brown dress she wore were similar to Lady Dorothy's portrait that was hanging in his bedroom. He came to realize that the woman he saw was definitely the ghost of the brown lady. At that moment, the ghost lady stopped and looked straight at him. Captain Friedrich Marriott became extremely frightened. Immediately, he pulled out his revolver and fired a shot at the ghost of the brown lady. The bullet passed right through the ghostly figure, and she disappeared. Since that incident, he never attempted again to interfere with the brown lady of Raynham Hall. Then, on September 19, 1936, a London-based photographer named Captain Hubert Provand and his assistant Shira were able to capture the real ghostly figure of the brown lady of Raynham Hall on camera. Shortly afterward, the ghostly image of the brown lady quickly became one of the most famous ghost photos of all time, and all these haunted occurrences in the Raynham Hall building became known to the whole world.